so excited to be able to share what I do in my classroom with all of you. Now, before we start, I just want to say one thing, and that is that this is just what I do. This is not the way you have to run your classroom. I'm not prescribing any formulas. I'm not giving you any structure that you need to use. But I thought it could be helpful to hear how one CS50 high school teacher is able to really help engage students and differentiate as well. All right? So we're going to go through a little bit about what I do, and then we'll have some questions, and then hopefully have a little time for you all to kind of really visualize how you're going to run your classroom. All right? Okay. So again, my name is Margaret, and I teach in New York City at a pretty large school called NEST, which stands for New Explorations into Science, Technology, and Math. It's a public school. It's a K-12 public school. I have 5 classes of computer science, and I have a lot of students. In New York, the maximum class size is 34, and I have like 3 sections right now with 34 in my class, and the others are just a bit smaller. So keep in mind also that having a small class size, big class size can certainly impact on how you teach your class. All right, this is my 8th year using CS50 as a curriculum, and I also teach at the Harvard Extension School, CS50 on Zoom. So I'm familiar with the material, but I do it a little differently in my high school than I do on the Harvard Extension School. So this is a picture of my school. It's in Lower Manhattan, and and that's what I do during my day full time. Okay. So my students come in with a very diverse group. All right, so I have students who have very little experience, really know nothing about computer science, think they might like to check it out, they might like to learn a little more about what it is. I have students also that come into my class that have been programming for years. They may have parents who are programmers, they might have created a whole app on their own. It's a really diverse group, right? Some of them already know they want to major in CS in college, and some just want to check it out. They think maybe it's something they might want to pursue. So I have a very diverse group, and mostly 11th and 12th graders, some 10th graders as well, right? So that impacts as well how I run my class. These are some of my students from a couple years ago when we had a hackathon, and we also invited the middle school students, and we had a lot of fun this Saturday having an extended amount of time to program. So there's a little sense of who we are. So now I'm definitely an adapter of the CS50 curriculum. Now I'm going to share with you at the beginning, I was more of an adopter because I really didn't know what I was doing. Right? I was trying to figure it out as I was going along. That may be the same at the beginning for some of you. And what I do now is that I actually do a lot of scaffolding for students that need extra support. So again, having such a wide variety of student experiences, I want to make sure that everybody can succeed. And so I'm able to do that, and we'll talk more about the scaffolding in the second section today, where I share a little more of the details on how I make that work. So now, how did I come to teach CS50? So I was really fortunate to be hired at this school about 8 years ago. And there was no computer science curriculum at all. There was no budget. There were no books. They just knew the kids wanted to learn something about computer science. And so I was searching and searching online, found some curriculums, but they cost money. There was no budget. So I had to go back and search again, which was the best thing that could happen, because I happened to find a video of Professor Malin saying, "Would you like to go to It was so lucky, right? And it was so great. I was like, yes, that's what I'm going to do. So I took the edX course online and immediately started learning it alongside as my teaching it to the students. I was just a little bit ahead. So really it just, and eventually really kind of came together with my school. They're very proud of the curriculum and the students are just loving it. It's been quite something. Now, one of the things I did since when I started teaching with the CS50 curriculum was also the first time I started teaching computer science. I had been a math teacher before that. And so what I did was that I watched the lecture videos over and over and over. I just shared this, it might be something you want to do. And so I learned from watching Professor Malin how to speak the language, how to break down concepts. Because one of the things I loved about his videos, the lecture videos, is that it made it really approachable, right? It really kind of broke things down and explained it. I'll tell you the truth, I tried to get into programming a couple of years before, and I would try to find videos and tutorials. Mostly they put me to sleep. It was just really hard to kind of go with it and to really make any sense of it. So when I found CS50, I was just enthralled with it. I was very excited. So I used the same language. I tried to use a lot of the same techniques, and I really tried hard to engage the students. So watching the videos over and over again was a way I was able to do that. And also using some of the activities that I saw, for instance. So I had my students act out goals, sort of like you did yesterday. At the beginning of the year, when I first introduced binary, kind of like in lecture 0, I had like several students, 6 students come up with their phones, lights on, lights off on their phones, and act out binary numbers. So I tried to emulate a lot of that and keep the students involved and keep the students engaged. And so just a little something again, something you may choose to kind of look into, right? So basically what I did at the beginning and what I still do is that I break down the slides that you see in the CS50 lecture videos, and all that material is available to you. I use just a few slides a day. I certainly don't lecture for an hour at a time. My classes are 45 minutes long. So I might choose like 10 minutes or so to talk about, to reinforce some of the material from the lecture. So I break them down, so it's a very short little mini lesson, and then I have my students practice coding in class. Now, when I started 8 years ago, I didn't really know if my students have Wi-Fi at home. They didn't all have Wi-Fi. Also, maybe not even computers dedicated to them. Now it's changed because since COVID, they had to get computers and they had to have Wi-Fi, so it's a little bit different. But I've always really believed in allowing them to do their coding in class as much as possible so they could be there to get the support to succeed, right? So my students take a lot of classes. They generally have 7 classes every day and some very rigorous classes as well. So I didn't want them to be overloaded and feeling like they're resenting this class because they don't know how to debug a program. So I always believed I wanted them to have fun in my class. I wanted to inspire that spark of wanting to learn more about computer science and wanting to continue to go on. And so I didn't want them to be frustrated right off the bat. So I always allowed them to have time to code in their class, and I still do that today. All right? And again, what I did particularly at the beginning, I tried to really stay fresh by solving the problems they were about to solve, like just before they would begin to start it, because that would allow me to remember the struggles I had when I first went through that program. So when I would go around and try to check in with them, I could see the struggles and I could see the pitfalls, and so I was easier able to give them hints and give them ideas and help them with their debugging as well. I would see a problem and I would more quickly understand what was going on with it, because I could just probably have that same problem myself, right? And I also use a lot of additional problems, as you'll see in a few moments. So I don't just do like the 3 P-set problems for Unit 1. I really do slow it down, because for my students to go from like hello to Mario in 1 step would be too sudden. So I use a whole number of programs, some older CS50 programs, some new practice labs that I made last summer. I use these to kind of fill in some of the gaps, and again, to kind of build up the knowledge more gradually. And I'll share, and all that material will be available to you as well. All right, so you can use this with your students if you choose to. Okay. Now, what do I do while they're actually coding? So usually I have them coding, and I'm just walking around, peering over their shoulder, checking in with them, right? Asking them how it's going, maybe asking them to explain a little bit of their code. And often as I'm walking around, especially at the beginning, students are often like embarrassed to raise their hand in front of the whole class and ask a question, right? They think I should get it, but maybe I don't. So sometimes just one-on-one or one with little small groups allows them to open up more and allow me to share. They share their struggles with me, and I'm able to give them some hints and help them out with that, right? The other thing I do is that when students finish their programs early, I actually don't make all the class work at the same pace. So if a student comes in with experience and they finish Mario just like that, I'll let them move on to the next program. After a little while, I actually do have students that are working on different programs, and some that go through a lot more of the curriculum than others. But as far as everybody is learning and everybody is getting something out of it, for the most part, I feel pretty good. But I do really work, I do want to keep the material rigorous. I don't want to water it down so much that there's no rigor, because I think it's important for students to understand that it's okay to struggle, and it's through that hard work that really you feel that reward, right? How many people felt a real sense of satisfaction when you got all those green happy faces when you read the Check 50? Anybody have a really good feeling about that? Right? And I love my students will share that as well, right? I got it, it was really hard, and now I got all the green happy faces, and it's a really satisfying feeling, right? And that's the feeling I'm going for in my class. I want them to feel that sense of enjoyment, that satisfaction, that I can do something hard, right? So I don't water it down, but I do scaffold a lot. And we'll talk a little bit now and a little bit later about exactly what that means, all right? I also like to point them as I'm walking around toward the many different resources. I might see maybe they don't quite understand strings, so I'll point them to one of the shorts that you'll see. Boy, do these fabulous shorts on strings, right? Or whatever. Maybe I'll watch a little bit of the lecture video, rewatch that little section of the lecture video, a couple of chapters where we see Professor Mellon talking about strings. So, I'll do that, and then of course I'll reteach if I need to. But I really want to make sure that they understand where to find all these resources, because there's so much stuff out there sometimes they don't always know where to look. The other thing that's really important is that I do have to stress over and over again when they're Googling to find some resources, that they're really careful not to find a solution, right? So, I had a student recently who, even after explaining it, it wasn't obvious. They thought they were searching with, how to solve Mario, and found some video. And then I looked at their code and I was like, I know this isn't your code. I could tell by looking at it that it was code from someplace else. She was like, oh, but it was great. The video taught me how to solve Mario. And it's like, no, that's not the point. You can, I think Professor Mellon was mentioning the other day, it's okay to Google for how to do a for loop, right? How to define a variable, how to create an array, but not how to solve one of the CS50 problems. Yes. So I really do have to emphasize, even after I do at the beginning of the year, over and over again, the importance of you need to complete the CS50 problems on your own. You don't Google for a solution to a CS50 problem. Those are the kind of resources we're looking for. Okay. So now I also found when I was getting started especially, it was really helpful to get ideas from other CS50 teachers. So some of the things that I learned about that I hadn't thought about initially is that I now have students write a reflection after every program that they complete. Because I think it's important to reflect on your own learning, your own aha moments, your own struggles, and also just that whole metacognition. How am I growing as a learner? How am I growing as a computer scientist? So it also allows me to evaluate their struggles. It allows me to evaluate how good a teacher I am, because if many students say, I really got confused on this part, now I know maybe that's where I need to improve my instruction. So I find the reflections to be really helpful, both for students to reflect on their own learning, to recognize their own growth, and also for me to get an understanding of where things are going well and where there needs to be more support. So they're a really important part as well. The other thing I learned from some of the other teachers is that, because I was so overwhelmed when I was starting, it was like puzzle day. I don't know if I could deal with puzzle day. But I saw some of the other teachers having puzzle day and so much fun and having a CS fair. And so I actually did do those. It kind of pushed me to do it myself. And it really enhanced the quality of the course as well. So again, those are types of activities that you might want to consider. I would invite the whole school for puzzle day. We'd stay, on a day after school. I wouldn't invite them on a weekend because they have jobs, they have family commitments often, but maybe Wednesday after school for 2 hours, we'd order some pizza, a little bit of candy, and then I'd have them come and do some puzzles, and not just my class, the whole school, just to kind of have that fun experience, problem solving together and working in groups. Okay? The other thing is that the communication with teachers was really helpful, just to support each other. I might run into some struggle, like I'm not sure the best way to approach this or that. So I'm going to make sure and encourage you that you do stay in touch with each other. I know some of you have met already through the work that you were doing in the while you were taking the class yourself, in your sections, and hopefully today. And make sure that you do exchange information, emails or other contact information, make some groups so that you can stay together and support each other. Because surely you're going to have struggles probably unique to your own environment, right? And unique to your own student body. So it's a great way to be able to have that extra support. It makes a huge difference. Okay? Here's the idea of puzzle day, right? They would have their laptops, they would have a little candy, and then at the end we'd give out prizes. And the students really enjoyed that. And then I usually have, every group would be able to get usually at least one solution to puzzle day, go around and give little hints to make sure everybody can solve something. And at the end of the day, they would present, students would take turns presenting their solutions. So again, just another way of bonding, another way to really appreciate problem solving. Okay? So in my first year, my trajectory as a teacher looked like this. at the very beginning, I didn't actually show the lecture videos in class, because I was afraid my principal would come and say, aren't you doing the teaching yourself? Like, what's going on here? You're just pushing a button. So I would recreate the lectures a little bit at a time, and I would try to do that. I didn't really even know how to scaffold problems at that point. I did the cs50, the edX course myself online, and I just gave them a problem and expected them to read it, and it didn't always work that well. So I found eventually that I needed to give more support that I'll talk about in a few moments. One thing I always did do was that I created little warm-up problems, kind of a little starter for the class, that would get the students thinking or getting a little experience with something that they were going to be doing in the next problem set. Maybe like recognizing a little bit of code, maybe when they were getting ready to do Mario, right? Having a rectangle printout or an upside down pyramid, and just say, predict, what is this code going to do? Because I think it's also important for students to get used to seeing code and reading code and making sense of it, right? So I might ask a little question like that, or maybe a conversation question to get a little bit of a class discussion. And I still do that today. I generally find that that's pretty helpful. As I gained experience, I really began to work more with the struggling students and learn different ways of supporting them. So I began to put together small groups of students that really needed extra help. I still have students sometimes that come in that struggle with algebra. So when a student has a difficult time with abstract thinking, they really are usually going to need more support to be able to solve these problems. So I would put together a small group, maybe put a table in the front, and we would work out, kind of look at the problem specification, work out some pseudocode together, which we'll do in the next section. We'll get some experience with that. I eventually created my own walkthroughs also, kind of like the walkthroughs you see that are dealt in the problems usually with Brian Yu, where it does these fabulous walkthroughs. And I found, because originally I thought, well, there's a walkthrough of the problem. All right, there's a walkthrough there. But I found that students really loved it when I did a walkthrough also. It was just more face-to-face. They could ask questions. And so that's something that I still do now. I'll do a walkthrough, and not for everybody. Some students really want to do it themselves. Some students don't even want to watch the walkthroughs and the problem spec. It's like too much information. They want to figure it all out. So I just invite the students who are interested, and I kind of keep it, it's a pretty differentiated classroom. I also kind of slowed things down a little bit, because my goal is that I really want everybody to feel they come out of this class successful. It might be successful at different levels, but some level of success, right? And so, just another one of my values, right? And again, as I mentioned, I allow early finishers to move ahead. So today, I do usually assign a couple chapters of the lecture video for homework. I think that the first year, in fact, because I didn't assign the videos at all, it was halfway through the year before they even knew who Professor Malin was. And it was like, oh my God, they really have to know more than that. So I do assign a couple chapters, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, for students to be able to get some experience understanding the concepts. And then I'll do it again in class. I don't leave it at that, but I'll explain it again in class, because honestly, they'll often need to hear it more than once. And this way they hear it in different ways. They hear it from the lecture, where you have all these different, materials that you can use, or, these very more elaborate setups. And then I'll maybe explain it myself in the class as well, right? I also use these practice problems that I'm going to show you in a few moments. You'll have the opportunity to use those as well. So because I feel like I needed to have more problems to build up the experience to go between hello and Mario, right? To give them more opportunity to practice, I did create practice problems. They're optional. You can use them or not use them. And so I started using them this year. I created them last summer with Carter. We worked together on those. And so what I might now do is assign a little bit of a lecture video to watch, introduce the concepts that are being discussed in the particular problem, right? I would present the new practice problem, but before I give them any help with it, I want them to grapple with it for a little while. I want students to get comfortable with struggle, because it's really important, right, to embrace that and to know it's okay to struggle. I like to tell them if they're not struggling, they're not learning anything new, right? Yes. If there's no struggle, you already know it. Yes. You need to struggle. Your brain needs to grapple with it, think about it, try it in different ways. So particularly with the practice problems, I encourage them to work in groups, try to figure it out, see where they can go with it. They often get stuck, but that's okay. But they'll do that for a couple days. And then I might begin to scaffold it. And so I might begin to work with them and create some pseudocode with it, right? I might even begin to develop a little bit of code at the beginning of the problem for them, then let them go back and work again. And then at the end, for the practice problems, I might do a code along and we'll complete it together, right? So now they have a little bit of experience maybe using nested for loops. And now maybe they're a little more ready to move on to Mario, right? So that's kind of my philosophy, and I've been doing that this year. I think it's been working pretty well. So why am I excited about CS50? I know there are other curriculums out there, but I love that CS50 really allows you to make it your own, right? You can adopt it, you can adapt it, you can pull this lesson, you can pull that problem, you can really make it your own. You can even make up your own programs. And eventually, if you're interested, you can make up your own cs50s. Like, all of this is out there for you to do. And so at the beginning, I did not make any of my own programs. I didn't have any idea how to do that. But over time, I did begin to do that. And I was able to customize them again, right? I love that there are various versions of the programs, more comfy, less comfy, so students can now self-select. Because I think it's important for students to have some agency over, like, which problems are they choosing to do, right? So I really find that to be really valuable to have that type of student choice. And again, my philosophy is that there's no reason for anybody to get bored in my class. If you're really ahead of the class, if you're moving through the problems quickly, there's always more and more and more that you can do. I've had a couple of students go through the entire class in the first semester. That's not typical, but that does happen. And I want everybody to kind of bubble up and kind of get to the highest level they can get, right? And there always are some students who just fall in love with it up front. And instead of doing their other homework, they're doing coding problems at night. I hear about that sometimes from the other teachers, right? And again, there's such a large selection of problems, and as you'll see, there's the practice problems, there's older problems. I've even created many years ago, which are still available, some little specific topic problems that you're welcome to use. So the practice problems are basically created in a limited kind of a very one or two little topics, right? There's about 3 of them for every unit. And again, you're free to use them or not use them. There are check 50s. We don't have the submit 50 built in, but you can create a submit 50 easily if you want. And again, I like to use them with, before I use the PSET problems, just as additional help for the students to get used to the whole idea of how to approach nested for loops or how to approach strings before they get to C's or phrases and have some other programs to do. And then each one also has a thought question. So one of the things I used to like to do is kind of thought question, again, sometimes the warm-up or at the end of the class, use a thought question to encourage a class discussion. So again, you're welcome to use any of this material in whatever way works for you. So my workflow now, again, is so I'll have the students watch a chapter or 2 for homework, right? I'll teach a little lesson on the program. I might actually take one of the practice programs now and do a code along at the beginning before I assign it for the students to do on their own. I feel that the code alongs are valuable, especially at the beginning, because students will see, how do I use the terminal? How do I compile code? How do I move from one directory into another? I can't tell you how many times before I started doing this, students would say, my program won't submit. I can't run check 50. Well, you weren't in the right folder, right? So just to get students, or students starting to type in code before I started doing this, hit the first open curly brace, it automatically closes, then delete the closing curly brace, right? And then the code doesn't indent and it's just all over the place. So I find it really useful sometimes just to kind of demonstrate to them, have them code with me, get that muscle memory on how do I type in the code, how do I use this code space, and to do it efficiently, right? So you're not having to delete the closing curly brace and then space in 4 spaces to indent for the next line, right? To have the code be formatted as your code, which, as we all know, it makes it so much easier to debug your own code when you can read the code, right? So just a little something that I've been doing more recently, right? And particularly with the practice problems, so I'll do the code along, then I'll have them collaborate on a different problem, right? Then I may scaffold it, struggle with it, they struggle with it, do a little pseudocode with them, then I'll review the solution with them, and then they'll do the PSET problem, and that will be their graded assessment for the unit, right? So that's how I've been doing it. The practice problems I've been kind of using just as a completion grade for practice, and then the PSET problems, that's like their actual assessment, and they get a grade based on that, right? So again, You can do it this way or not. I just want to offer up some of the things that I've done. It
Hello.
may or may not be helpful for you.
Debug.
Hopefully, get a little something to take away
Half
from it.
cam SPN.
So I pace out the, as you can see, the units way slower than the standard CS50 curriculum.
Yeah.
So of course, the bold ones are the standard
Hello.
problems that you'll see,
Debug.
right? But debug is one of the practice problems I created that has jumbled up code that you have to learn how to debug.
Agak lebih mudah lah.
Fahrenheit just turns, it's 3 lines of code, but it's the first time they're doing a calculation, a little calculation from Celsius to Fahrenheit degrees, right? Then half and prime are a couple of practice problems. ISBN does a lot of, you can create a loop and modulo, so we get a little bit of practice. And then one of the versions of Mario and Cash for Credit, right? So that's kind of the sense of how I do it. And I haven't done it like this all the time. This is how I did it this year. Other times I've done, do it a little differently every year. I'm always experimenting to find the best way to make this work, right? For Unit 2, I would use again some older programs like this program initials. Password is a practice problem that you're going to see a little bit later. Of course, readability is a fabulous program. The kids love that one, very real world. And again, that would be one of my graded problems. And then old friends, novels, calc, some more practice. Then either Caesar or Visionaire, which is an older problem which you'll have access to, or substitution goals lower. So those again come to some of the choices that they have, right? And so it's worked fairly well. When I get to Unit 3 and 4, in Unit 3 I don't always do everything, but I make sure I will do plurality. Right, I want them to experience a linear search. I'll also spend a lot of time on the searching and sorting algorithms, and I've created my own programs, or my own little problem spec to get them to practice building those for themselves, right? And then in Unit 4, we might do filter. Maybe I don't always do recover. Some students will, I'll make it available, but if students are struggling, maybe they don't quite get to that. During COVID, I had to slow it down a bit. Students would be out sick, or it was crazy, right, for everybody. And so we didn't get quite as far. But, we got enough that I think the students still came away with some really good experiences and the experience of having some rigor. Because that's an important thing, even if you don't complete everything. I don't usually do pointers or memory allocation. Because with 150 students, it's just too much support that they require to do. They can do it. But with me and 34 kids in the room, it would take me too long to go around and help them all, kind of on a small group basis. So I don't usually do those, but some students do them. I do have students that just kind of are addicted to it, they move ahead, and I'm there to support them. I know how to help them with it, but I don't make it a class requirement generally. They always do HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They love doing homepage, one of their favorite programs. I actually have them use an essay they do in their ELA class. I love doing like interdisciplinary stuff. So in ELA, they do an essay called Write My New York, where they have to write about a little portion of New York that's very special to them. It could be a subway station that they start every day, the day going into that subway station. It could be a deli on the corner that they always get a soda and a bag of chips from. It could be a park or a playground where they play basketball. So it's some very special place that's near and dear to them, that's their little part of the city, and then they use that essay and they make a 4-page website from it, which is really very personal, and a lot of students really enjoy it. In fact, my students are finishing that up this week, so they'll work on that. So that's kind of like a little bit of an idea of how I pace, right? And again, so you don't have to use the whole curriculum. You can pick and choose, but you do want to make sure to have enough in there that there's rigor, right? You want to make sure that they understand all of the basics, and you want to make sure that they understand it's okay if something is hard, right? It's supposed to be hard. And I pull away as we move along. I don't do as much pseudocoding, but for Units 1 and Units 2, I do like to give them that support. So what are my goals for my computer science class? So one of the goals up front is to help them feel comfortable with these strange symbols. I always let them know up front, the first few weeks is going to probably feel, it's very common for it to feel overwhelming. These symbols, these curly braces, these parentheses, where do they go, the semicolons. So I let them know it's okay to feel a little overwhelmed. That's everybody's experience for the most part. But keep in mind, as you become comfortable with it, it will become more comfortable. Your eyes will get used to it. Was that true for you guys? Yeah. Did you have that experience? Yeah. So that I would share that with them, right? That at the beginning, it's a little bit overwhelming, it's a little crazy, but it takes time. And I really encourage patience. I'm very patient with my students.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's important. And I want them to come out really loving this class, not to feel like I was really kind of trying to force them to do something just too quickly for them to absorb. I also want them to feel confident that they can do this. Because some students come in like, oh, but this is not for me, I can't do this, right? But then the best thing is by the end of the year, when I have them sometimes write a reflection about the class, and it's like their favorite class, and I have that experience too. All right, I want to keep everybody, as I said, engaged, right? So that's why I let them work at their own pace for the most part. Obviously, by the end of the market period, they have to have a certain number of programs done. But I try to give them extra time if they need extra time. I don't want to feel the stress of having to do a program at 3 in the morning because it's due on Friday, right? So I'm pretty flexible with that, right? And my goal overall is that by the end of the year, I want them to be comfortable using online resources to figure out on their own now what to do, to draw away the support from me so that I don't have to be standing next to them telling them how to do something, but now they have the confidence and they have the skill to be able to look things up and figure it out on their own. Right, so that's really kind of the goal for me by the end of the year, that they can now write a program to solve some problem they have without any other supports, right? And I really want to make sure everybody can succeed. So I want to take a few moments and see if you have any questions.
Ma'am.
Oh, we have a lot of questions. All right, go ahead.
My question is, this is what I think. I'm curious about cs50 and problem sets. Did you make your own problem set and then your own activity, or make same question like cs50 in the website?
No, I've made my own problem sets also with my own cs50.
So the next question is, how can you make your own cs50? I mean cs50, because in the website itself I didn't find any tutorial that
There'll be some follow-on Zoom sessions that will teach you how to do that. It's too much to do it today, but there is the capability to create your own checklists, right? It has to be a program that has inputs and outputs that are very clear.
Yes.
So you can't really do a check50 for a website, right? Because you don't have inputs and outputs. But if you have inputs and outputs like in the terminal, in C or in Python, you can create your own check50s, right? And that will be available for you over time. You're not going to do it today.
Yes, that's right.
Right? Yes.
We are too high. We are sit too high. I just wonder what you do when you get stuck, when you code in the class. Second of all, no, when she demonstrates the code in front of it's moving everything.
Get it up.
Sometimes I get by the call, send it. People will
how to merge it with math or art or something like that. Well, again, since you can create your own programs, your own problems over time, once you become more familiar with how to do that, if you want to have them create a problem to do, I don't know, solve a quadratic equation, you could have them write a program to do that, something like that, if you know what I'm saying. It's just, it's not built into the curriculum, but certainly it would be something, it would take some thought. Maybe that would be something you'd want to start a little group of teachers here to do. Maybe there's other math teachers that would want to incorporate it with math and come up ways of solving math problems, right? In the Python unit, you'll notice that you can very easily deal with CSV files. So I find the CSV files become very engaging for students because there are some real-world data sets out there now that you could use for science, or you could use for any type of research for other disciplines, right? So I have another group of my students now working on CSV files. There are some of them working on CSV files they found out there with air pollution, right? Or just researching, I don't know, what do they do, movies or computer games and sales of this, and all different kind of disciplines. Finance also, looking at different finance CSV files and doing different analysis of that. doing standard deviation for something based on information, the numbers they get from some CSV files. So I think once they get certainly to that level, there's a tremendous amount that you can incorporate different disciplines and using real world data, right? So anyway, that's just, but I would encourage you guys to try to group up yourselves, like if you teach science and computer science, perhaps you'll find some other people who do the same, and you can create some things together.
Yes.
You know, create a community. And I think that'd be fabulous, and we'd love to hear about that.
Yes.
I think that'd be great. Other questions? Yes.
Okay, during the years to work I want to know how the way you handle the struggle student with no prior experience in coding.
Majority of my students have no experience in coding.
And how to handle that and how you combine no prior experience with the grade 1.
We're going to talk about that in the next section. The next thing is going to be about differentiation and scaffolding. And we'll actually do an exercise and we'll practice doing some scaffolding yourselves. Sorry? I use the cs50, but I add to it a little bit as well. Yes, all the way in the back. Yes.
Governor Dini.
And first, and then, yes. Yeah, the pink and then the black, yes. Yeah.
What is your biggest challenge so far in your teaching experience? And then the second thing that I want to know, how can you bring the mood of the class up?
How do I, let me make sure I understand, my biggest challenge, and how do I bring the students up to in a big class environment? So I'm going to talk about the differentiation and the supports in the second section I'm going to do in a minute.
Yeah.
In terms of my biggest challenge, you know, I think that just, I don't know, I have to think about that, but I think, you know, there always are a couple of students that really struggle, and they may struggle across all subjects, right? So I sometimes have to come up with alternate assignments for them, because my administration wants me to help everybody succeed in class as well, and so sometimes I need to come up with an alternate assignment that may not be, maybe it's a research essay in technology that substitutes for a programming part, but only for one, you know, a couple of students that really struggle. So sometimes it's kind of difficult and challenging to figure out, but I'm talking 2 or 3 students. The majority of students I'll do scaffolding, we'll do pseudo-coding together, and we'll do a little bit of coding together, and kind of bring them up that way. Other question, oh, there was, yes.
Berdiri. Dulu. Jangan diri. Ask your body.
Jam.
Dulu.
How do we have the opportunity
You don't have to say anything.
I guess for me, I just really enjoyed, I just thought the class was such an amazing introduction, and I think probably many of you as well too, right? So I just went back, I think, and I, especially at the beginning, would watch Dr. Albert's energy on the stage in the lecture over and over again. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
And that just,
Thank you. No.
to feel excited.
No more.
So again, if I wasn't
Thank
sure
you, no
how
more.
to present something or wasn't sure, I would get some ideas usually from the excitement, from the lecture video, and I would try to
Thank you
do
for
it in
that.
class.
Ada no more question. Karena
Yes.
Diri.
aku nggak tahu.
Tadi kan ngangkat terus.
What you do in your before you join your class? What you do? Are you do you plan your goal or you make format assessment first?
I'm sorry, say again, so what did I do before I was teaching CS?
No, in your class.
Oh, in my class,
In your class in my CS material. What you do? Do you plan your goal? Or you make a format assessment first? Or do you do that?
So what do I do for, well, I always log on.
Formatif lain, dia nyebutnya lain. Nah, nggak paham ya. How to know your student knowledge ya, for the first time ya. Kayaknya kayak gitu ya.
And I'll have in my lesson plan.
Student learn
certain topics
Apple,
that I try to anticipate what students are gonna have in advance. And if I do a code log, I'll always have a printout with me. So I have a cheat sheet because I don't want to forget something up front, especially in the environment. I'll often use that. And I make errors. And sometimes I make errors on purpose, so that students see that we all make errors. I like to let them know that coding is all about making errors, especially they have a special word for it called debugging. And so if you're not making errors, you're probably not learning something new. So yes.
What level exactly?
High school. High school. Yeah. Yes. Well, that's a bigger problem. Our guidance counselors usually get parents. And there's usually not a lot, there's usually a couple, one or two students in that position. And often I have to go to my office hours because I have support. And usually I get
Miss, my friend want to ask. My friend. Dulu silakan. Miss, my friend want to. Dulu silakan, ya silakan.
How are we doing on time, everybody?
Silakan, my friend, miss.
Nggak jadi ya.
The hardest thing when I was starting to teach, I think was just knowing how to pace the class, knowing how to introduce the problems, you know, knowing how to give students enough support. I wasn't so good at giving hints. I was afraid I would give the solution away. I didn't want to give it all away, but I did maybe give enough support. So I would over time learn that it's okay to give a few hints, right? And it's okay to help get some things that are working. Over time, start to work with just a small group of students that need the support, and the people who are happy to work independently or with their own groups can work while they're working with the school. But it took a couple of years to learn that to place. That didn't happen immediately, right? Let's take another question.
My friend.
Your knowledge about cs50 is right. You repeat again your knowledge about cs50 every year.
Do I repeat the notes about CS50 every year? I like to rewatch the lectures every year.
Only rewatch,
I use-
not following one more special courses about cs50 every year.
Well, I'll always watch the new lectures every year, because every year there's a new
Yes.
set of lectures, right? Because Professor Malin redoes the course every fall.
Yes.
And so every year there are new
Also
lectures.
the materials is the same or not?
Sometimes it's the same and sometimes it's different. So I draw on stuff, though I have a whole bunch of lessons sometimes I use, and then sometimes I create new ones. So it's a combination.
How about the student?
Enak sih.
You want to ask?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
My friend.
Hello. I'm so interesting about how you can manage your CS50 class. So let's talk about reality. It depends on our facilities, right? And in my reality is the school. It's my school, of course. Is one of the newest in my town. So there's not too much computer in our laboratory. So is it useful when I gave it one computer in two students with firework, and I think more about pseudocode, and when I gave I will be give set, problem set. I think it's more like it's difficult to give them because I know that as we know that their students' ability is different. So how we can manage our CS50 class in the little computer class?
So you have 2 students on every computer, you say?
Computers, one computer
And
and
2
two students.
Yeah, so there's also a technique called pair programming, which you might, if you don't, you can look it up very easily, where one student actually tells the other student what to type in, and then they switch. Because the thing is that if 2 people are using one computer, you want to make sure there's not one person doing all the work,
Yes,
and the other
yes,
person sitting back and doing nothing, right?
yes.
So
Switch.
pair programming, and I have done that also, just to get students to talk and to help each other. It's a really great technique. So you have one is the driver, one is the navigator, and again, you can look it up. There are models online. So one to give the direction, the person that's typing just listens to the person who's telling them what to type in,
Yes.
right? And then after like maybe 15 minutes, they switch roles, right? And then if they see a bug, then they'll kind of help out. And they might notice, do you notice something funny in that for loop? Is it a better way to do this? You know, to kind of help ask each other good questions. But I would say pair programming could be a very useful technique for that. Okay?
We allow to collaboration.
Sorry?
So we can allow to students collaboration.
Yes.
So they collaborate together, and you can, so you can decide how you want to grade it, right? You can give them both, they submit one program for the 2, maybe they both get the same grade, and then you have a little quiz, and that kind of tests their individual knowledge. So it's really up to you, but that definitely can work. Okay? So how are we doing over here? Any other?
Yes, ma'am, ma'am.
Take like 1 or 2 questions, and then I think we need to take a bit of a break. Okay, I know you raised your hand.
I raised my hand.
I see in your country in US, you teach only 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's very short for
It is.
Did you do class every day?
Yes.
I
5
always
days?
elaborate my.
So 45 minutes every day, 5 days.
Yes.
And after your class, people bring their own device,
No.
or they use
Some do have their own laptops, but we have laptops now with devices.
in 45 minutes they don't finish them, but they will continue.
Yeah, they'll often take maybe a week to finish a program. They don't finish a program in a period generally. They'll often have them within maybe a week to finish a program.
So they don't have homework, you know.
There is no homework.
Yeah, sometimes they might write the reflections for homework, things along those lines.
They don't take one at home.
They can code at home, but I don't require it. Most times, sometimes I do. If they're going too slow, then it's like you gotta finish this program by this week,
Yes.
you know. But generally, I try to allow them to do their coding in class and do other writing assignments.
And last question, in your class, how many students at one session?
I have 3 classes of 34
Literally 4.
and 2 classes like starting in the mid-20s.
34 students at one time.
Okay.
They're big classes. They're very big classes.
Ma'am, my last one question.
Yeah.
So you don't combine our class into one, it's like Professor Malan, 100.
No, we have, that's kind of how it works, all right? I think that's
Me. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your visit. Have you ever stuck when you collaborate, when you code in front of the? Have you ever stuck or when you code in front of your student?
Have I ever got stuck?
Have you ever
Yes.
get stuck? And what did you do when you get stuck in front of your student? Because sometimes when I code in front of my student, I elaborate. I already prepared the code, but sometimes I try to elaborate my code, and I get stuck and I confuse how to finish it, and the class is What did you do? What did you do when you get stuck in front of your class?
All right. So what do I do if I get stuck as I'm doing the coding?
Yes.
Yes, it happens. It happens, right? Well, again, I always have the code next to me, so that helps. But sometimes you still make a mistake.
Yes.
You might listen to syntax,
Ada
right?
tetean di sini.
And so sometimes the students will catch it. They'll say, "Oh, you typed that in wrong," right? A typo or something. Sometimes I'll try to debug it in front of them, which I think is actually a good thing because they see that even the teacher makes mistakes. That's how it's okay, right? And so sometimes I'll plan mistakes on purpose so they can see what it looks like to figure out and debug your code. So I try to use it as an opportunity. If I can't, there have been times where I couldn't figure it out, like during the class, and I'll say, well, you know what? We'll leave this and come back to it tomorrow. It's fine, you know?
You don't have to be shy to admit it.
It's fine to
Let's try to find it tomorrow.
It's all fine, it's all fine. So I think we probably need to start 5 minutes. Okay, so 5 minutes. What I wanted to do is that I wanted to actually have you take a few minutes and just work in kind of the groups around you. I wanted to start to have you discuss with others how you can visualize running your own class. I want you to just start to have a vision of what that would look like. All right. So what do you think? You know, what do you think you might like to do? Is there something you may want to take away from my presentation? Maybe not. It's fine. So I want you to, because we don't have too much time, rather than go into other groups, let's just do like groups like maybe like 2 in front, 2 in back, like groups of 4, and just have a little bit of a discussion with 4 people around you, just to talk and share what is your vision, right? And what, if anything, you think you're going to need to be successful. All right, and then we have a minute or two, so we just want to take about maybe 3 minutes, a little quick discussion, and then maybe 1 or 2 shares. All right?
Okay. Jawab. What is your vision for your class, CS class?
Okay,